Hey y'all, and welcome back to the studio. I am so excited you're here for the third and final part of my Camaleonda Sofa project. There were many a days where I felt like I never would have made it making this couch, but we're here. We made it. I'm so excited to share the final parts with you. We are going to be sewing, tufting, rouging, paracording, stapling, drilling, all of the things today. There are a ton of steps, so stay tuned as I walk you through how I brought this beautiful, iconic sofa to life. Enjoy! Now we're covering the foam with quilt batting. You're going to separate all of the grooves so your paracord can thread through in the later steps and do it all the way down the sides. Then you're going to take the electric staple gun and staple it all the way around so it's nice and flat. When you get to the corners, you want to pull it up at a diagonal angle and cut along this line. Then you're going to cut down this side, wrap it around, cut the excess, and then you're going to fray these edges so that they're nice and soft and lay down effortlessly. Mark off your furniture legs so you have plenty of room to drill them down later. Staple your corners down and cut the excess. So because I'm not a professional, I did the eyeball it and hope it's the right length measurement strategy. I gave myself some buffer room on my first two pieces, placed them face down on one another, pinned them together, and added my seam line with the chalk. I sewed them together after one sewing class, and these bar stools really help prop it up because the fabric's super heavy. For the third piece, you really want to pull the fabric as tight as possible into those groove lines and to all of those corners where you drilled your holes before. This is going to make sure your seam lines up with those lines and you get that iconic Camaleonda look. You want to do that all the way down the sides, and you especially want the seam to line up where the holes are going to be. Now you're going to connect the dots along the seam line. Place your two pieces of fabric face down on one another. With velvet, you want to make sure the napping is going in the same direction or it won't match. Pin it all together outside the seam line. Sew and remove the pins as you go. Now it's time to add our grommet. You are going to take the seam ripper and dip it into the fabric just a little bit, enough for your nail to poke through. Add your grommet and make sure the fabric is tight enough around it to keep it secure. Place the metal plate in the grommet and then flip it over onto a hard surface. Press the fabric down around the grommet, add the ring with the grooves facing up. Use the tool provided to hammer it in place. Sink the fabric into all of the groove lines to find the most accurate place to add your grommet. Gently cut the thread along the seam and then add your grommet in. Then complete all of the same steps to secure the grommet onto your seam line. We are applying a lot of pressure on these grommets, so it was important to reinforce it with some hand sewing. I did it alongside the seam on the sides where it may have been weakened, and then in and out through the grommets just like this. I'll show you a diagram of what your ring should look like after sewing. I went around it about 6 times like this. I added a 1/2-inch ring to some paracord, holding it together with my tweezers. I'm lighting it up to weld these two pieces together. Now I am threading this paracord ring combination through my grommet, and I'm going to use my screwdriver to try to work it through this batting and foam and MDF. Takes some time, but if you really carve it, it's not so bad. I lift it up so that I can accurately pull it through all the way, and I'm using my seam ripper, my tweezers, anything it takes to pull this through. Once you pull it through, you want to push that ring down as deep as possible to get that chunky look. Now it's time to staple it down, honey. I did this zigzag motion to make sure it was really secure. To get that pack of buns look, you have to sink your fabric into those grid lines as you go, adding one grommet at a time, adding one ring at a time to really pull it tight. Now, as you're going down the sides, you really want to pull this as tight as possible before you add your grommet hole, lining it up with that hole that you've drilled in the side. So close. Once you've added all of your grommets and stapled down your paracord with the rings on all 4 holes on the top and on both holes on each side, it's time to start stapling this gorgeous fabric down. Now, I don't know what this term is called. pleating, rouging, but basically you're gonna ruffle up your fabric and staple it down until you get that iconic Camaleonda look. Now this is super challenging because, well, my fabric was super thick. So getting that staple gun all the way through the fabric into those 2x4s was kind of a challenge, and sometimes the staples would just pop right out. So you really have to press hard to get it to staple down. You also want to make sure you're leaving plenty of space so you can drill down your furniture legs later. So I had to do some trial and error and checking it as I go. Once you have it all stapled down, you can cut your excess. At this point, you want to make sure that furniture leg is going to fit in place. Keep cutting your excess, and I at this point like to staple down the bits of fabric that may be poking out because they will show when you flip it over. I drilled my furniture legs with a long drill bit and 1.5-inch screws. Look how thick she is. Now it's time to cover your seat back and armrest with the batting. This was a crucial step for me because my carving was not on point with these. You'll follow the same steps, stapling it down, cutting those corners, wrapping it around, and fraying the edges.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go.
At this point, I had run out of fabric and I had to buy some more, so I was doing my best to match them up and make sure the napping matched. And we're back at it again with my eyeball where the seam should go method. This was not a perfect method, so let me know in the comments if you have a better way to do this. And I always check the napping before I sew anything. Once you sew the first 2 pieces, you want to line that up on the seam of the ottomans, fold it over, and find that next seam line. After you sew all 3 pieces, you want to line it up on the seams of the ottoman and staple it down exactly where the seam should go before stapling the rest. Work in that same process, pleating that fabric, stapling it down, whatever it takes to get the rouge. Same exact process for the armrest, you just need 1 seam line instead of 2. Oh, you thought we was done? No, there's so many more steps. I wish I could tell you I had the perfect solution to finding the lengths to the paracord and the carabiners, but I don't. It was trial and error, hope for the best, destaple, staple again until it was tight as I could possibly make it. Highly recommend linking the shortest rings first, then the back, then the diagonals. Same thing on the armrest, the only difference is you only need 3 carabiners for the armrest and 6 for the seat backs. Once you finalize your lengths, you will do the same zigzag motion to make sure the paracord is secure. I also added this piece of fabric to make sure I had a smooth surface when I added this onto my ottoman. Highly recommend stapling that piece of fabric better than I did because it will show up later. I'll fix it at some point. Link all the carabiners and you are finally done, honey.